Thanks so much for watching our show. We really appreciate the support. It costs a lot to produce, so we're asking for donations and pledges here on Patreon. Thanks again. Okay, welcome to See It and Feel It with Dr. Brett, and I'm Dr. Brett, and today I'm here with Jack Beer, who just won a national championship in soccer at Georgetown and is like venturing out into the real world after having played for a USL team as well. Hey, Jack, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so tell us about, when did you choose soccer? How old were you? And were you a multi-sport person and then, wound up like focusing? How'd that process go?
Yeah, so I think I started playing soccer when I was about 5 years old, and I was a multi-sport athlete. I'd like dabbled with all the usual sports, so football, basketball, and I was actually pretty good at the other ones, not soccer. But I don't know, but something about soccer kind of just spoke to me. I remember one time when I really fell in love with soccer was when I was on vacation in 2006 and the World Cup was going on, and I could not go on vacation. I didn't want to leave the house because the World Cup was on, and that was all I wanted to watch, and completely fell in love with the way that the fans felt so passionate about the game, and it just totally inspired me to want to keep going and take it definitely, seriously. And
Well, it's pretty amazing because you were 6 years old at the time,
yeah,
right? Like
yeah, 6 or 7.
15,
And
6 or 7.
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And I completely fell in love with it at like you said, at such a young age. Actually, my first birthday cake, I just saw a picture of this, was a soccer field. So
Uh,
I I like to think that I kind of just came out ready to kick a ball in the net. So
that's awesome. A little bit of soccer karma, whatever you want to call that,
yeah,
past life soccer.
yeah.
Uh,
But yeah, no, I continued through high school. I played for a team called New York Soccer Club. We were really successful on the club level, and got scouted to play for Georgetown. So that was obviously an incredible experience, but definitely, as you know, like a complicated one with just my head and my mentality towards soccer and kind of where it fit in my life and my well-being just as a human being. So yeah, I guess it's taken me to this point where I was in and out of deciding whether to continue to play pro soccer or to kind of move on and test the waters in other areas of life. So right now that's my plan, but I'm definitely forever grateful for all the experiences that I've had with soccer thus far.
awesome. So, what were some of the highs and lows at Georgetown? How many years did you play? I know you graduated, but how many years were you actually playing soccer there?
So with COVID and the year that I took off, only technically two.
Wow.
So two out of the four possible years that I could have played. My freshman year, I guess I'll just give a little recap. My freshman year, we won the Big East tournament, and that was great. I had a good season, enjoyed it, but I think I definitely had difficulties going from a 90-minute player, like basically the star on the team, to kind of just a role player, someone that comes in off the bench. I didn't really know how that operated. I wasn't used to all of the little things that came with not just being someone maybe that came off the bench, and I had to learn how to organically work my way up in the lineup, and that was definitely a difficult process. And all of that along with what a college freshman year brings, which is just a new environment and new people, and a big transition. So that went well, but at the end of my freshman year, I talked to my coach and kind of told him what was going on with my anxiety. I definitely felt like, like there were days that I just didn't want to get up in the morning and, for an 8 a.m. training and stuff, and put in the work. And it was definitely affecting, how I operated during the days. I think I I tended to kind of just go through the motions, which was really affecting my anxiety and kind of led to a little bit of depression that summer when I was in between my freshman year and sophomore year, kind of like deciding whether I wanted to continue or not. And I ultimately decided to take my sophomore year off and see how that felt and went. And pretty quickly into my sophomore year, when I was just watching the team from the stands, I kind of just looked at the team playing and figured that, you know, it's not as bad as I make it out to be in my head, and I could totally compete and you know, have this be a positive influence on my life, like it was, you know, growing up. So I rejoined the team my sophomore spring leading into my junior year, and I was playing great and felt great. And then actually right when I got to preseason for my junior year, I started having really bad panic attacks again for about like a 3 or 4 day span of just pretty much straight panic. And I was pretty open about it with my coach at that point. So I was just talking to him, telling him what was going on. And I again decided to at that point, I thought I was done. I thought, you know, soccer's not for me. I can't maybe take this. And then, you know, about a week later, teammates were texting me on and off, and I had been in conversation with a couple of the coaches. You know, I really wanted to push it as far as I could, and I wanted to play so bad because I felt like, you know, I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it, and really enjoy it. So within a week, I was back on the team. I made that decision, and from there, honestly, it just all seemed to work out. That national championship season was like unbelievable. I was not very anxious, definitely not depressed. We were winning, you know, all of the time. I was playing great. I felt good. So I was really happy to push through that. And obviously win a national championship, which was amazing. So
Wow. What advice do you have for kids that struggle with anxiety or depression? You know, because I think a lot of athletes have ambivalent relationships with their, you know, like desire to perform and the pressure to perform and the pressure to sort of always be getting better and better and, you know, in the competition and all that stuff. It's a lot for most athletes, and some manage it better than others, but some are sort of wired in a way that makes it difficult. So, you know, you have a lot of perspective that, you know, maybe other people don't have. You also have a lot of insight.
yeah, no, I mean, I think one thing that a lot of people struggle with, that were in my position, including me, is just reaching out for help and kind of acknowledging what is going on. And I think the biggest thing for me that got me through it, and the biggest advice that I would give, is to, you know, to first of all reach out to anyone that, you know, baseline, like family, friends, you know, just to have someone that acknowledges what you're going through and understands that, you know, you're maybe not in the best headspace, will actually in turn, you know, help you get out of that headspace and make it seem like, you know, it's okay to basically not, you know, be 100% all the time and not have to keep grinding, like you said, through that.
Were other kids supported? Because sometimes 20-year-olds, 18, 19, 20, 21, they
Mhm.
haven't, if they haven't been through it themselves, they don't always, you know,
Yeah.
most people don't understand unless they've been through it. Well, you
Mhm.
and I have talked about this privately before about, you know, there's a small percentage of people that are wired pretty empathic. And when they are, they can put themselves in other people's shoes and imagine what it would be like to be someone else and then be understanding. But the vast majority of people don't really do that often, or they're just not wired that way. If they're hyper competitive, then they're probably not going to be that empathic. So, what
Mhm.
was that experience like where you're struggling? Sometimes you're reaching out, sometimes you're not. You know, what was that like?
Yeah, that was definitely tough because, I mean, like you said, you got 20-year-old, you know, hyper competitive kids at the college level just basically wanting to, you know, kick each other and
Yeah, beat your ass.
yeah. So it wasn't exactly the smoothest experience, telling that guy who's trying to kick me and yeah, kick my ass, like, hey, I'm kind of struggling. Can you help me out at all? And there were totally struggles and like misunderstandings. And I think that was honestly like in a weird way, a vital part of the process. I think like because I realized that, okay, I can't turn to some of these people, the fact that I acknowledged that actually helped me, because I got in this loop of endlessly, maybe trying to lean on people that simply it wasn't in their DNA to have that focus. Like you said, like they were kind of wired just
Yeah,
to.
they're just not. It's in, like you just said, it's not in their DNA. So
Exactly.
asking someone to sort of be understanding, that's hyper competitive and not really capable of understanding, is not going to fly.
So
But
that's.
that actually helped you, because
Mhm.
help us understand why that helped you.
Yeah. So I just basically was able to acknowledge that, certain people I just simply couldn't lean on in certain circumstances, and I had to come to a point where I was okay, and I had kind of let go of that, and that's where, once I did that, I kind of opened my mind to possibilities. So like that's where you came in and have been helping me, and that's where when I talked to my coach instead of some of my teammates or other people that were just solely soccer related, like that helped, or teammate kind of relationship, that really helped a lot. But at the same time, my teammates, some of them did help. Like I had that camaraderie and that relationship with, not everyone obviously, but there were definitely a couple of teammates that I've been friends with for a while that, made me feel valued and kind of put some perspective into my head about, that I was valued on the team, and that, they thought I could do it, and that it would be fine. And I know my coach actually made some tangible like adjustments, that like on away trips, for example, I would room with these two guys that I'd been friends with for a while. So like that's a perfect example of like,
A coach being emotionally bright enough to help you figure it out, right?
yeah, exactly. Like he really, and it's really not common. There's a ton of, I don't,
No, I mean, that's pretty amazing what I'm listening
yeah,
to.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think if it was any other college coach, I would probably have been off the team freshman year and probably have never kicked a ball again. So
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
yeah,
What would you do differently? I know you're young, 21, 22, something like that.
hmm
And so perspective, it takes a lifetime, it really does. But still, you've been through a lot, right? So, if you could do things differently, what would you do differently? On this, let's just say age 5 or 6 is when you started playing soccer, and you've been hyper, pretty competitive ever since, right? What would you do differently if you could take it over, like, and just design it your way?
I think it's a good question. I don't think I would honestly have it any other way because I got, a national championship out of it, and the story is um very personal and cool to me. But I think I think playing soccer, at least from my experience, I felt like I was in kind of like a little bubble at some points, where it was the soccer world and there was this world outside of it that sometimes it felt like you really couldn't interact with or touch, because it felt like it had to be solely soccer all of the time. I really like dedicated a lot of my life obviously to just playing soccer. So I think honestly I would have rather kind of opened my mind and head to other possibilities. Um, Not that I would have stopped playing at all, but I think a better balance was probably needed for me to um, diversify and kind of figure out other things that would compensate for all of the competitiveness with soccer. I don't think I figured that out um, for a long time, and it definitely contributed to a lot of the anxiety and like depression that I had, because sometimes I just couldn't find another outlet, I guess, because soccer was my outlet. And when that was going badly or that was hurting me, it, seemed like I had nothing. So it seemed just kind of like this endless pit. So I definitely wish I, focused. I wish I had other groups outside of the team or outside of soccer that I could focus on more. And, other hobbies and activities that I could relate to and ways to spend my time. I think I definitely would have done that differently.
Yeah, it's really fascinating, Jack, because I think, that's the sort of challenge and the pitfall, right? Is like as a D1 athlete, you focus harder and harder on your particular sport in order to excel. And then in some ways it becomes your entire world. In some ways you get a little narrower,
Totally.
right? And then if it's not going well, you're sort of in a catch-22, right?
Yeah.
And the question becomes, is it possible to really, how much is possible to diversify when you need to focus so hard in order to be able to be one of the better players, right? At a D1 level. It's a
Mhm.
really tricky dynamic and challenge. Can you be, a surfer dude and still be a D1 soccer player? It's like,
Yeah.
I'm sure they're out there, but they're pretty rare. And Georgetown, right, is also pretty challenging academically, I would imagine,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So that definitely filled up
So
filled up the
yeah,
other.
so there's not a lot of freedom there to sort of not do soccer all in, and then, at the D1 level,
Totally.
not do school fairly all in because you're at a top university in the country, right?
Mhm.
So that's the tricky part because, as a sports psychologist and life coach, I'm helping people sort of make that decision in high school sometimes where they
Mhm.
decide they'd rather just play D3
Mhm.
and not have to go all in at the D1 level because, maybe they don't want to give up their entire life for whatever the sport that is. And yet other kids are wired in such a way that, they think they might want to be a pro or something. And if that's the case, then D1 is you
Mhm.
have to go D1 pretty
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, totally. And that was me at the end of high school, kind of wanting to go D1 and commit my life to it to go pro. And I obviously came to the conclusion after a little bit that it just wasn't for me. So I don't, I don't wish I went D3. I still am happy I went D1 and kind of had that experience. Um, but yeah, I mean that makes total sense, and it's definitely a tough decision that I think everyone has to come to terms with at some point in their athletic career if they choose that. So
Yeah.
um,
At the
yeah,
professional level, Jack, do you think it's possible, at least in the beginning anyway, to be balanced? Or is it so hyper competitive that you have to be so all in that balance is elusive, right? What's your
yeah,
thoughts on that?
I think I would go seven. Like I think I would. It would be really really tough to have maybe the right amount of balance that you would get if you weren't playing. But I think that's honestly the sacrifice that it takes probably to make it. I think the higher and higher you go and the better you get, the more and more you do have to sacrifice in other
Hmm.
parts of life, because it is that time consuming, and that it really is, compared to other jobs, it really is kind of a lifestyle. It follows you everywhere you go, where you travel, what you eat, what you do, who you spend your time with and stuff. So um it definitely consumes a large part of your life. But I think, I have friends at the professional level that do balance their time, fairly well. And they have other activities that they get into. They have podcasts. Some just play Xbox, but others are doing, good hobbies and other activities that kind of make their life more well-rounded. So I think it's definitely possible. Just definitely little harder for sure.
Yeah, just not that common, right? Definitely
Yeah,
possible, but definitely, but not all that common.
yeah, totally.
Um, yeah. What are you curious about? While you got me on the other side of this podcast, we do this differently, but now we're on camera. What are you curious about?
Curious about. As far as your work, or like?
No, anything. I mean, I'm asking an open question. It could be related to what my work, or it could be anything. Anything you
Mhm.
want to bump off of me right now.
Mm. Um, I guess this is actually I would like to ask this question.
All right.
What is like the most common topic that people bring up with you, like to help them work on, I guess?
The most common topic. I mean, I think a lot of people struggle in many different areas. You brought up the topic of anxiety and the
Hmm.
topic of self confidence.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of people struggle with both of those. I think almost everybody has some anxiety somewhere in their lives. In with athletes in particular, it can be related to performance. And I think most people struggle with confidence, especially as they develop themselves and their identity. You were also referring in part to your identity when you say that your whole world was consumed by soccer. And then your identity is so consumed by that, if something's not going well, then you're in trouble because your identity is so caught up in that particular area. Thanks for watching See It and Feel It with Dr. Brett, and stay tuned for part 2 of this interview. Remember to like, subscribe, and share with a friend.